Latch the windows, lock the doors, and put the kids to bed. It's time for another episode of
Tales from the Garage!
Hey guys. It's a Saturday night. I haven't done one of these for a little while anyway. I thought I was due, and I'm freezing. It's probably in the 30s, I don't think it's in the 40s. And as you know, if you've watched these in the past, I have no heating here. No heating or air conditioning here in my garage. And of course, I'm not wearing anything appropriate. I felt it was time to come back and do another Tales from the Garage. And I really didn't know if I'd get any more of them in from the garage this year. However, the weather forecast for this coming Tuesday is saying it's going to go as high as 51. Now, that's during the daytime. I can't do these during the daytime. I don't recall. I must have done a couple Tales from the Garage in the daytime, one or two. But to me, it's a nighttime thing. I got to do these at night. That's when I feel it the most. Beyond the garage door, right there, is the outside world. And just during the day, you can't hear that much, but I'm aware that there's this hustle and bustle going on there. And I wouldn't say distracting. It is distracting in a way. Not because I hear sounds, but because of my imagination, I guess. I think there's all this stuff going on there. Whereas, at night, or at least after dark in the wintertime, which is relatively early, especially in this freezing weather, everybody's kind of hunkered inside as much as possible. So I was going to wait till Tuesday, thinking that the temperature is going to be much warmer on Tuesday. But again, by the time the nighttime rolls around, because I don't want to do these during the day, who knows? It'll probably be just as cold as it is now. And sometimes some of the ways to prepare for these is to actually be out here for a while before I start filming and acclimate a bit to the temperatures. I didn't do that today, and I could have, because I have a printer out here, and it's hooked up to this old computer that I use, which I think is a Windows 7, and generally the printer works most of the time. The newer computer I have is a Windows 10, and I have a newer computer hooked up to that inside, where there's actually heat. But it seems like Windows 10 is really funky with the printer. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So whenever I want to use a printer, I end up having to come out here again, which is not a problem most of the year. In the summertime, it doesn't get that disgustingly hot out here. But now, it's mid-December now. It's going to be rough going until March, at very least, mid-March, if not much later, to come out here and actually use the printer. So I have no preparation. I decided to come out here and do this literally 5 minutes ago. I don't really have anything to talk about. What I've been listening to in my car is an MP3 disc I made of the Dave Grusin and Don Grusin albums that I showed a video or two ago. And just been listening to other various stuff inside the house. So this is going to be just all vinyl pulls, and I decided to well, I'm freezing, so I'm not going to be able to do an 8.5 hour video. Let me just start. I'm just going to randomly pick something here. This is an interesting one, and one that I showed very early in my VC video making, probably to the extent that nobody remembers it. A guy that I'd never heard of. I remember the day I bought this. We used to have a chain store, at least here in New Jersey. There was a lot of them for a while in the early '80s, going into the mid '90s or so. Maybe not even that long. Called Disco Mat, and there was a couple of them. And one of the ones that were further away that I would drive to on Sundays, because the local one was closed on Sundays, I believe. And I just went through, a lot of miscellaneous sale items or whatever. A guy I'd never heard of called Terry Plumeri, an album called Ongoing, brand new, sealed, $3.99. And this is the vinyl age. This is long before CDs came out. This is a 1978 recording. I probably bought it in the early 80s. definitely before CDs. I didn't know anything about Terry Plumeri. This was in the jazz section. I like that black and white cover, though. It's simple. I think that's a drawing. I don't think that's a photo. Maybe it is a photo. But the list of people that play on it is what prompted me to pick it up. John Abercrombie, Ralph Towner, Mark Cohen, who has gone on since to play, actually, I believe, in John Abercrombie's band, Michael Smith, and the National Symphony String Quartet. Now, quite a few years after this, I don't know how many albums Terry Plumeri has put out. I can't prepare for these because I'm randomly pulling the vinyls out, so I have to do everything from whatever I can remember. But several years after I discovered this album, which is, I haven't listened to it in years, it was a good album. I remember liking it very much. Terry Plumeri is actually an upright bassist. He does a little bit of vocal work on this album, but he's an upright bassist, which, for me right there, once I picked it up and I saw the guests, and I love the upright bass, and I saw that the leader was a bassist, an upright bassist, I'm like, well, this is, no question, $4. I remember liking it. It was actually recorded in Falls Church, Virginia, which may be, the location, and I'm guessing which is where Plumeri is from. I'm guessing. Maybe why we haven't heard more from him, because he's not an LA or a New York guy. The record company is called Airborne Recording Company in Maryland. There's 6 tracks on here, and what they are is Terry Plumeri doing some voice on some of them, acoustic bass, and then just a various mixture of all the different musicians that I listed that were on the cover. So there's a couple tracks that are just trios or quartets with Michael Smith, who plays percussion, drums, and kalimba on one track, and Mark Cohen, who plays some piano and percussion, and John Abercrombie's playing electric guitar, naturally. And there is one track, there's just one track that both John Abercrombie and Ralph Towner are playing together with Terry Plumeri, and Mark Cohen also plays on that track as well, playing acoustic piano. And there's a whole violin section from that National Symphony String Quartet that they play on about half of the album, the various string players from this quartet. So there's a couple tracks that are just Terry Plumeri on bass along with the string quartet. And I had this in my stack for a long time of albums that have not come out on CD. But what I realized, or what I discovered a year or two ago, is that this has come out on CD. I have to get it, but it's been retitled, and I forgot what the new title is. So I took it out of my stack of things never released on CD before. Definitely a good album for fans of, if it sounds good to you, an upright bassist doing original material, sometimes with a string quartet, and then mixed in with these various guitarists, and Mark Cohen on acoustic piano, and Michael Smith on drums. If that idea sounds good to you, it's a good album. There's nothing like atonal or really outside in it. A couple years after I bought this, maybe more than a couple years, I remember seeing Terry Plumeri's name pop up on at least one or two soundtracks for movies. I think into smaller independent movies, if I remember correctly. And this is before the age of the internet. I saw this, and I wish I could remember what the movies are. Nowadays, you could probably figure it out by doing a search. But I have to look into this. I have to look into the CD of this, which was retitled. But I believe I don't think it was changed when it was reissued. Hopefully not. So that's my history with that album. A nice little addition to the Abercrombie Towner collection, and one that I wish I had on CD. So I'm going to just select another one. What is this? Aha! This is the first one I ever pulled out. That was VCLT that was given to me. And I believe this was from Carm. J.D. Emmanuel, Echoes from Ancient Caves. A keyboard guy. You know, the funny thing is when I looked at the back picture, I thought I was pulling out a Terry Riley album. Because the guy looks quite a bit like Terry Riley in his slightly younger days. I have to play this album again. And this is one that I haven't yet copied over into my computer. Any vinyl that I'm going to listen to that I have that hasn't come out on CD, I don't just casually play on my turntable because my turntable's kind of messed up. So when I am going to make the effort to play it, I copy it into my computer so I could play it from my computer and burn it onto a CDR. But it's recorded in around 80 and 81, and apparently he's got a bit of a jazz background. But he also was very much into electronics. So there's a little bit of Emmanuel's got a little bit of a jazz tinge to some of the music. But he uses tape loops with the Krumar organ, which I believe at one point was also the same type that Terry Riley played, except for this one he has wind chimes. He mixed in the organ with wind chimes and birds that were recorded live. It's got some acoustic guitar and synthesizer on it, which is a guest guitarist, Greg Kelly. And there is synthesizer on here. It seems like the Krumar organ is the main keyboard on here. And it looks like it was recorded directly to a 4-track reel-to-reel deck. And it originally came out on cassette in 1981. Now, I guess the vinyl pressing came out later. I had this inside, sealed inside sealed plastic. This was a real nice present for vinyl, especially. I actually had this is one of the ones that I actually had in my bedroom, and I had so many stacked on the floor that I decided to bring some of them out here because, as you'll see, I'll be recording videos again in my bedroom. I have every square inch filled with vinyl, and I have instruments in there and all that stuff. I gotta, this has got to go back inside now, I think, with me because I want to listen to it again. I remember liking it very much. Let's see what else. Well, I'd pull out an ECM. Well, as if having Ralph Towner and John Abercrombie on the first album wasn't enough. Here's one that I bought pretty much when it came out. Jack DeJohnette. The funny thing, I was just before I started filming this, I was just thinking about Jack. I was just thinking about Jack and his ECM years and his independent years that he's been doing recently. And here it is. I pull out Jack DeJohnette's New Directions in Europe. This particular lineup of because he had the band Directions, and it morphed and had all different members. And eventually, in about '78, it went down to a quartet. And John Abercrombie, I believe, was in all of the versions of the band that was referred to as New Directions. And he was the only other constant, I believe, along with Jack DeJohnette. The late John Abercrombie. I still can't get over his passing. And so John Abercrombie is on here with his mandolin guitar. And it's kind of cool because there's actually a picture of him playing the mandolin guitar live in the back here, which I don't think with the glare you're going to be able to see it. If I can even find where he is on the cover. Yeah, you can. You can't see it that well. But there's him playing his little electric mandolin. And Jack on drums, plays piano on one track. The late Lester Bowie, half of this band, is no longer with us. Lester Bowie on trumpet from the Art Ensemble of Chicago, and the great Eddie Gomez, who is still with us on upright bass. This is more one for completists. I say if you were gonna, because it's a live album, it's a little on the raw side, and of course, being live, there's not overdubbing involved or fixing in the studio, pretty obviously. So it's a little on the raw side, more of an album for completists. I think the studio album, this was recorded, by the way, in June 1979. The studio album from '78 is that came out a little more than a year before this was recorded, with the same exact lineup. is really a superior album. And as a matter of fact, probably I put that I think it's just called New Directions, with Abercrombie, Gomez, and Lester Bowie as well. And it's an excellent studio album, and I definitely put that one in like the top 5 of my favorite Jack DeJohnette albums, and I have a lot of Jack DeJohnette albums. So to make it to the top 5 is pretty good. So if you were going to sample the band, because of the overdubbing, and especially John Abercrombie on the studio album gets to lay down some nice kind of electric guitar washes, and then plays like the mandolin over it or some lead guitar over it, and it creates a nice kind of bass, over which the other people play. Similar to having a keyboard there, an electric keyboard. Now hold on one second. Just in case my voice goes funky, I always have something here to drink. So yeah, I bought this at $6.99 at Discomat once again. The list was $9.98, so that would tell me at the price of this, and this came out in 1980, that this was kind of toward the end of the vinyl era before CDs came out. How much? I'm 16 minutes into it. I'm not going to stop. I'm just going to pull something else out. What a surprise! An ECM album. Here's what, I love all these albums, but I get them a little confused. Okay, I particularly like this setup. Egberto Gismonti with Nana Vasconcelos, and just the two of them. It's a toss-up for me what my favorite lineup is on Gismonti albums, either completely solo, which I love, or duets with Nana Vasconcelos. And when I mean duets, not in a traditional sense, because yes, they do use, I believe in some cases, overdubbing, especially on the percussion. And but it's a nice, if you know Nana Vasconcelos, he's not a typical hand percussion. He doesn't really play trap drums. He plays the berimbau, and he does a lot of these things did a lot of these things on voice. Another, sadly, guy who's not with us anymore. By the way, I love his one solo album that he made on ECM that Egberto Gismonti actually wrote a piece for. His choice of percussion is interesting because he plays a lot of unusual things, not congos and bongos and that kind of stuff. He's very big on the berimbau and, all kinds of shakers and things. And so he had a very unique touch that's apparent on his albums. And on the albums he did as a member of Cadona. Speaking of Nana Vasconcelos, I thought when Colin Walcott passed away, Oregon didn't initially continue. They had to pause a little bit before they brought in Trilok Ertu. And after Trilok Ertu left the band, I kind of thought, maybe even before Trilok Ertu was the replacement percussionist, I thought it would be natural to have Nana Vasconcelos become the percussionist in Oregon. Why? Because Colin Walcott had two bands. He played with Oregon, and then in his time away from Oregon, he formed this trio, Cadona, with Don Cherry, who also passed away, and Nana Vasconcelos. So after Walcott passed away and Don Cherry a few years later, only Nana Vasconcelos was the only member of Cadona left alive. And I thought it would be natural to have him join as the percussionist in Oregon. I wouldn't be surprised if he was asked, maybe they tried and it didn't work out. I don't know, but I would have loved to hear Oregon. It would have been very different because Vasconcelos is very much a different percussionist, and he didn't play sitar like Colin Walcott did. But I think he would have been a real interesting addition to Oregon, and certainly would have brought in a very, very heavy world music vibe, much more so than like, say, Mark Walker, who's more of a traditional kind of drummer, who's been their drummer for a number of years now. And even Trilok Ertu, who is, he plays tabla, which I love Trilok Ertu's work in Oregon anyway. but he played a lot of tabla and a lot of things that sounded like traditional drum kit. But I gotta say, to this day, Trio Lagerto is still one of my favorite percussionists. But I think Nana Vasconcelos, because of his background or because of the choice of instruments that he plays, I think he would have been a real natural and very interesting choice and brought more of a world music vibe into Oregon had he ever, been a member. Sadly, he's gone now, so that's not going to happen. I don't remember a lot about this album. The reason is there's several albums. I know I love it. I know I like it very much. This is one that was recorded in June 1984, came out very late in 84. And the reason is that I have several albums that are duet albums with Egberto Gismonti and Nana Vasconcelos, and having not played them for a while, they've kind of blurred for me. There isn't anyone that I think, I ever put on where I said, oh, this is disappointing or anything. There's a certain level, a certain quality that all their recordings have. And, and this is an all-acoustic setting because Gismonti's playing acoustic guitars and pianos and flutes and that kind of thing. So, there's no way that he's going to even attempt to do a commercial kind of album. And as a result, these albums, regardless of when they were recorded in the 70s or 80s, end up sounding a lot fresher than a lot of the electric and especially the fusion music that was recorded at that time, which hasn't dated that well. I mean, even if you like it, a lot of music, the electric, slightly less mainstream jazz recordings that use electric instruments that kind of have a dated sound, even if they're still enjoyable. But because of this acoustic context and, of course, the way ECM records their albums in their studios, these still sound like, to me, like they could have been recorded and this could have been something that just came out as a new release. Always worth investigating. And again, I bought this. I'm pretty sure I have this on CD. I bought this toward the end of the vinyl era, 84. Yeah, this must have been amongst the last. This came out very late in 84. This must have been really amongst the last vinyl that I bought before the CD era came. Because by 85, I remember, I know I was buying CDs. Got time for one more. Oh, I pulled out two. One of them is a Jack DeJohnette album, so I'm putting it back. And the other one's an Egberto Gismonti album. So I guess I picked too close. And here's where I talk about the confusion. Just randomly pulling this out. Here's another Egberto Gismonti album with Nana Vasconcelos as the only other member. So this is why, you know what I said about the previous one? Ditto for this. So here's one. Danza das Cabocas, I can't pronounce it. That was recorded in, this one was recorded in 76, so it's quite a number of years before the previous album. But again, and this one has the same lineup, just Nana Vasconcelos and Egberto Gismonti on flutes, guitar, piano, and of course Nana and his percussion and his voice. And this came out in 77. And I also bought this at Discomat, as if that mattered. But this is why I can't talk a lot specifically about the albums, because these duet albums tend to sound like they could have been, even though they're recorded a number of years apart. It's about 8 years between the last one and this one. This one coming first. I like that cover too, by the way. Again, it's another well-recorded world music acoustic thing, and I remember loving it very much. I haven't listened to it for a while, and I don't know if that I have both of these on CD. I have to look and make sure that I do, because I really did love both of these very much. But you can see why I get a little confused about what exactly is on each album, having not just played these so I could speak about them, but randomly pulling them out. Well, since I already pulled out another Jack DeJohnette album, I'll talk about this one. One of Jack's first albums that he recorded outside of ECM. See, at the time, early in his solo career, Jack DeJohnette recorded several of his first solo albums, but then fairly quickly got signed to ECM. And for many years in the 70s going into the 80s, all of his solo releases under his own name were recorded for ECM. I believe this is the first solo release since he joined ECM that didn't come out on ECM. This is from 1985, and his previous albums had come out on ECM, all except for his earliest ones. And his albums after this for a handful of years came out on ECM. And then he went on independent labels, and he signed with other labels here and there for various years. But this was recorded in New York, March 1985. This is called the Jack DeJohnette Piano Album. And this was a little different concept for Jack. And this was produced by Orrin Keepnews, who is a very famous, now passed away, just in recent years, jazz producer for many, many, many years. And when I first got on the internet, and there was these, I don't even know if they exist anymore, these bulletin boards that you can go on and you could find by topic. And one of them was, I guess, I don't know if it was General Jazz or ECM Jazz bulletin board, and people would post up there, and you could read their posts, and you could leave a post if you wanted, and people would see it whenever they would go back to this bulletin board, and sometimes they would type a response, sometimes they weren't. You didn't get any kind of email notification if somebody had responded to something that you wrote. You would just have to go back onto the bulletin board and just see if there was any posts made after you left your comment. It was kind of basic, but it was kind of neat and fun. And that was really the first, contact out in the cyber world I had with people, was these bulletin boards. This is all before, YouTube existed and things like that, and certainly long before streaming of music or anything. And so there was this jazz bulletin board. And one of the people that would go there was Orrin Keepnews, who must have been fairly old at the time. And so as a result of him being there, people would ask him questions, because he had done some Sonny Rollins albums, I believe. And so he had some stories that he used to put up on this bulletin board, which probably would have been worth saving if there was a way to copy and paste this stuff somewhere. And I remember, I don't know if he brought it up first or I brought it up. I asked him, somehow, I got into a conversation about this album with him, because he was the producer, just like the Manfred Eicher of this album. And he said that I believe Jack came to him with this album. I believe it was, I don't know if it was already recorded or not, or he just had the concept. And he said, I don't know why he came to me. I guess Manfred Eicher didn't want the album. And when you hear it, I don't know if it's partially because of the studio, but it's very unlike the type of writing that Jack did and the kind of recordings and records that he did with ECM, even at this time. The album is of the 8 tracks, only 3 of them were written by Jack DeJohnette, and all 3 of them were tracks that Jack had recorded before. Now, Jack only plays piano on this, and he adds a little bit of synthesizer on a couple of the tracks, and you have Eddie Gomez on bass, who has played for a long time with Jack, off and on, and Freddie Waits on drums, so Jack did not overdub and play his own drums. One track is unaccompanied piano solo. This was recorded in 2 days, January 14 and 15, in Woodstock, New York studio, which is where Jack lives. Jack lives in Woodstock, or right around Woodstock, and records many of his albums in that general area. And it's an odd album for him. There's one track that's 8.5 minutes long, Gigi Grice's Minority, and he does John Coltrane's Countdown and John Coltrane's Spiral, and he does the Cyndi Lauper tune Time After Time. It's got if you're used to listening to Jack's ECM stuff, the sound is really kind of weird. It's a bit of a dry sound, definitely not recorded in the ECM studios, and it has kind of, it's kind of dry. I don't want to say commercial, but it doesn't have the life that Jack's ECM recordings do. And it's almost like he was aware that he was going to record this for a different label. And I don't know if, I'm not sure that this came out on CD. I know I don't have it on CD. I was a little disappointed with it. On an album like this that features primarily acoustic piano, you kind of, especially it's the 80s, I kind of wish the piano was recorded better. And, one of the bigger surprises is it doesn't get very far out there. I think it doesn't matter how familiar you are with Jack's keyboard playing. I think if you just put this on, you would never guess this was Jack. Because there's nothing on the album that, Jack at the time was still doing a lot of kind of freeform improvisation in his tunes. And none of that's here. And the tracks that he's recorded before, like Lydia, which he's done many times on his albums, and even Ahmed the Terrible, which is is a song that he's recorded several times. These are really subdued versions of these, very low-key versions. Not that that's bad in and of itself, but it's a strange album for Jack. And I'm not crazy about the way it was recorded. It's more of an oddity, and it's kind of like the live album that I showed. More of a thing that when you've got a lot of Jack DeJohnette albums, and you want to hear him do something apart from his normal thing, that's when you would pick it up. It's an interesting album. I don't know if it came out on CD or not. I'm trying to get the picture of them minus the glare in the studio there, but it's very hard. Yeah, I'm not sure that's coming out. So it's Freddie Waits on drums, who I would have heard of. I don't know to what extent I have Freddie Waits on anything else. Yeah, I'm not really sure. I know him from, recording with various people, but I can't think offhand of what else I may have him on. So, still got a lot of ECM in there. I might have to go back and pull some more albums out from my bedroom floor that are not ECM and kind of throw them randomly in the stack there, so it doesn't look like all I'm doing is doing either ECM albums or ECM artists, but because a lot of these are pretty much in that bucket. Okay, so I've gone over a half hour. I'm still shivering. I'm still cold. So it's colder than the last time I was in here recording, I guess, because I haven't yet adapted to it. So I'm going to go. I hope this had some value for someone. By the way, yesterday, I've had the time, but I haven't really done any demos or done any music recording. And yesterday, I actually flipped on the old synthesizer and recorded a thing that's just literally like 3 minutes long. That hopefully will serve as an introduction to, as a beginning of a multi-part piece. But I've done that before, and nothing's ever come of it. But it's finished. It's not like a half-done thing. It's only 3 minutes, but I don't really think that I need to add more to it for it to be complete. So I'm kind of hoping that it might spur me on to do more writing. Okay, that's it. That's what's going on with me. I hope everybody's. I'll be back before Christmas time, certainly. And if that Tuesday turns out to be, any warmer than it is now, by the time the evening comes, which is just a few days away, I'll try to get back in here and do another one before it becomes impossible and I get frozen out. Okay, guys, I'll see you soon. Take care.